All right, it's the Knights of Outer Ren, episode 0.011.38 with Joshua Outred. How are you, Jossie?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, I've just been trying to figure out how to podcast again. That's always good.
I checked, it's been over a year since we've done the last one.
January 27th, 2017, in fact. Was our last podcast, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. That was our last podcast. We are now on video. Hey everyone!
Upgrade.
I'm the angel. No, I'm the devil actually, because I'm on the left side. I think that's the devil. So I'm the devil on your shoulder. And yes, I'm Magnus. He's Joshua. Yeah, we're back. And right before a brand new Star Wars movie, last time we did a podcast, we did it, I believe, was it after Rogue One? It was after when I came back from Iceland.
After Rogue One. Yeah, it would have been the month after Rogue One, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so...
12 months before The Last Jedi, and now we are 5 months post The Last Jedi, so...
Yep.
Yeah, time flies.
Oh my God.
Wow.
This is... So we're about to see the fourth Star Wars movie in a few years. The second Star Wars movie this year, technically.
Yeah.
Because I saw the last time I saw The Last Jedi was in January. Actually, weirdly enough, I think around January 27th. So like almost a year after you and I podcasted.
Yeah.
Because my friend came in from LA and we had seen Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and The Force Awakens together. Ooh. So we had gone to all the premieres of those movies together. But I had been in Iceland during Rogue One, so we didn't see Rogue One until the end of January. And and I may have even mentioned all that on the last podcast we did, for all I know. And so we did not get to see The Last Jedi together, but I did get to see it with my girlfriend. And that was her first ever Star Wars premiere. I think she did see Rogue One, but she's not a Star Wars fan, so she saw it and wasn't really aware of like what was happening.
Yeah, that's a difficult one, isn't it?
I think she thought that Jyn Erso was Rey at one point, like, but she wasn't really. She's talked about it. She wasn't really paying attention to it. Now she is all caught up. Like I've caught her up on everything. I've had her watch those. What's that one channel that does all those Star Wars videos where they show you like the canon, like they put together all the video of all the canons.
I don't know. There's one
Star Wars Explained, maybe? Is that what it is?
That's it. Yeah, Star Wars Explained. Yeah.
So he put out a video last year, right before The Last Jedi, that was a description of everything in canon. He's just put out a new one
I watched that a couple of weeks ago, actually.
I haven't watched it yet. I need to watch it. And then, so we watched that. So, and then we watched basically the videos from the Battlefront 2 DLC.
Battlefront 2, yeah.
Battlefront 2,
the campaign mode, yeah. That's it.
We watched that. We loved that. In fact,
it was really good. I played that. It's really good.
And what's really interesting is just watching the video without playing the game. You know, you get it. It's almost like a cinematic experience. It's like watching a movie. And after we had just gone through all the Star Wars movies when we watched that, and it was, you know, I don't want to take too many shots at the prequels. But you watch that, and then after just having watched the prequels, and it's really difficult for me to argue that the prequels are well-made movies after watching that. Now, the story is fine and all that for the most part in those movies. I just mean execution-wise. When a video game's cinematics are better executed than, you know, $100 million or $150 million movies, that's problematic, you know?
Yeah, that's the conversation we've had before, isn't it, about the prequels? I just think there's it's just such a difficult. It's like a subject that it's very polarized. You have one side who are like, no, the prequels are my styles, they're great, and then you have another side who are like, no, you know, they're not good. They're the worst things ever.
Yeah.
But you know, I kind of find myself as a kid. You know, I was 5 when the Phantom Menace came out, so you know they were very much the Star Wars of my generation. But as a kid, I loved them. as I've gotten older and I've watched more movies, and I appreciate great movies, I can see the faults more in the prequels.
Yeah.
But I try not to knock them, because I think that without the prequels we wouldn't have half of the lore in Star Wars we've got now, and
Yeah.
I think they add a lot in that sense.
Yeah. I know, and I agree. And I mean, I think we got some good characters and stories out of it, and I think it's kind of like the way I've been talking lately online about Thor. The first two Thor movies are not good. Like,
Yeah,
you may
I
like
agree.
them, but they're not good movies. They're not really well
No,
made.
they're one-time watch for me, and that's
And
it
then you
really.
watch the third, and you're like, oh wow, like this is one of the best Marvel movies. Like
I had an
most fun at
absolute ball
least.
watching
Yeah,
that. I really
loved it.
enjoyed Thor, and I
So
loved the bit at the start where he's swinging around on the chain, and
yeah,
the fire god, I can't remember
yeah,
his name
even
now.
just the beginning of that, and so you get to like you can't get there without at least and even Iron Man 2, 3, and so
Mhm.
on. Like movies that people don't necessarily think are good movies. I
Mm,
disagree on some aspects about that, but you get to a point where you're still building the story, and I feel like that's where the prequels are. The prequels are the building of the story, so
mm,
that you get to a certain point. Now, did it necessarily have to be of that quality? No, they could have been of
mm,
better quality. But I don't think that you can wash away the story. When people say "not my Star Wars," it's fine if
mm.
you say that about the filmmaking, like the actual
Yeah,
filmmaking. But if you say that
I
about the
agree.
story, that's too bad. Quit Star Wars. Like, go ahead and
Yeah,
just quit, because it's not going to change. And we have now heard, and we're going to be now talking about Han Solo.
yeah.
We have now heard things. You and I are completely spoiled on that
Oh,
movie. We,
yeah,
we know
yeah,
everything
yeah,
that's going
yeah.
to happen, but we're not going to get into spoilers. We're going to try to
No,
avoid them since we're going to be talking about them next week.
yeah, yeah.
But there are definitely aspects in this movie that are clearly prequel era,
Hmm.
and I mean, they have to be, but they're not avoiding the prequels. In fact, it sounds like they are doubling down on the prequels, and that every notion that we heard about leading up to like the Force Awakens and such, about what Kathleen Kennedy was going to do with these Star Wars movies, was wrong. They are not running away from the prequels. They are basically embracing them and saying, "Here's our take on that story that George was telling." In fact, everything we know now, and especially in that art of, I should have it behind me here, but I don't,
Hmm.
because I was reading it. The art of the Jedi, or the Return of the Jedi, Return of the Jedi, the Last Jedi. See, it's so difficult when you add Jedi
Yeah,
in
there's
there.
so many of them now. Yeah,
The Art of the Last Jedi book, they break down when a lot of this stuff was conceptualized. It was conceptualized before George even left the company. So things that are
hmm,
in the Last Jedi, the things that are in the Force Awakens, were things. Actually, there's more things in the Last Jedi than in the Force Awakens that George
yeah.
conceptualized, and they're not running away from anything.
No.
All they
And you know
decide.
what?
Go ahead.
No, no, yeah. I was just gonna. I feel like this Disney is anti-prequel. I feel like this comes from a very weird place, and I'll tell you where I think it comes from. Pre The Force Awakens, they were very much trying to establish, this is the film we want to make. These are the films we want to make. We want to bring all aspects of filmmaking into this, and they emphasized on practical effects. Okay, there was a big emphasis on, we are using practical effects, which I never felt personally was a knock on George Lucas, because he used more miniatures in The Phantom Menace than practical effects were used in The Force Awakens anyway.
In
So
all of the original trilogy, in fact.
yeah, but I feel like people went, oh, hang on a sec, they're talking about practical effects. That means they don't like the prequels. Not really. In fact, to be honest with you, I see no evidence of that anywhere. JJ was talking about the
Yeah.
film he wanted to make. Kathy was talking about the films she wanted to make and the way they were going to make them. And to be honest with you, all of the films so far, Force Awakens, Rogue One, The Last Jedi, and obviously Solo, which we won't talk about too much, but they all have elements of every part of Star Wars. Early on in The Force Awakens, Kylo's like, perhaps you should have considered using a clone army, and it's not a knock. It's
Yeah.
it's a it's a it's a callback. Perhaps your troops aren't working. Maybe we should use a clone army. And I really like little lines like that. I love little moments like that. We don't need it to be. We don't need like deep explanation about what happened 60 years ago, in the prequels.
Right,
And
and then the Last Jedi, I think you have one of the greatest little moments of that, like a great moment of exposition, which when Luke is talking about Darth Sidious,
that's
and
right. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very quick, but it gets to the point. In fact,
And I love that bit. Yeah. Yeah. I
yeah, and
love
you
that
don't,
bit.
and it's like you're taking the greatest hero in Star Wars lore, at least the way that the fans look at it,
Yeah.
and he is saying the words that validate the prequels. And I
Hmm.
think for some people I think that was upsetting, maybe even on an emotional level, to have
Mm.
him so validate something that they said for so long.
Yeah.
Because people, and this is the problem that we get in Star Wars almost more than any other fandom. I think the only other fandom I can compare it to right now is like the Game of Thrones fandom. But even
Hmm.
that isn't on that level. Maybe the Game of Thrones fandom is bigger because more people are exposed to it more
Hmm.
often over the year.
Yeah.
Like because it's
It's more
once a year
consistent.
and
Yeah.
it's more episodes. But I think that there is like this overreaction to everything based on what fans build up in their minds. And one of those things is the negativity the fans build up in their minds. Like they sit there and they go, "You better not do this. You better
Mm.
not do that," which to
Hmm.
me is like really silly. Like if you say you better not do this, then you're already set yourself up to be disappointed. In fact, I was walking out of Deadpool 2 a couple of days ago,
Mm.
and I'm right behind two guys who are walking out. They're opening the door. They opened the door for me. And as they're walking out, they're complaining about Deadpool 2, about their disappointment because it didn't do XYZ. And I remember just walking past them, I almost said to them, like, well, why did you set yourself up like that? They were never going to do that. Like,
Mm.
that they were complaining about, they didn't understand that Fox and Marvel are not the same company. They're making the same
Hmm.
movie. They were expecting like things in the movie that can't be in the movie because Marvel and Fox don't communicate on that level right now. And
Hmm.
so I'm sitting there going like, you've set yourself up for a disappointment that will never happen. And that is like the EU fans who sit around and say, oh, you guys better do this. First of all, I can tell you just from what little I know about what they're doing at Lucasfilm is they didn't abandon the expanded universe. They are figuring out ways to incorporate it, not because they're afraid of you, not because you put the pressure, because that's what they'll tell themselves.
That's
Well,
what they
like when
think. Yeah.
they'll
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
themselves like we put the pressure on them. No, it's not because of that. It's because studios are lazy and they know that if they have a data mine of characters and designs, they're going to use them. That's why Lucasfilm always reuses things that they abandon at some point. Things that Lucas
Exactly.
maybe said, nah, not good enough for this movie, maybe for another movie. There are designs from 1999 or 1996 when they were like conceptualizing the Phantom Menace that are coming back into Star Wars simply because at
Hmm.
the time George said, nah, not for
Not for
this
this.
movie.
Yeah.
Not for this movie, but now they're going back and going, oh, he liked it,
Just.
but he didn't use it. So they're and the people who think that like they just abandoned George, they were just like, fuck you, George, we're gone. That is so far from what they're doing. Kennedy is one of his friends. She's not
Yeah.
going to
Exactly.
disrespect him. So all these arguments, and I think now that we're getting into like talking about Solo, I think some of the reviews that I've read, and I haven't seen the movie, so I don't know if it's good or bad,
Yeah.
or if
Yeah.
it's somewhere in the middle. But some of the reviews are clearly leaning on expectations based on the critics' knowledge of the firing of Lord and Miller. Because they're
Uh,
saying like, oh, this movie feels XYZ because and it's clear. They're like, oh, what if this platonic perfection, like we're seeing with DC fans talking about like, oh, when are we going to see the original cut of Justice League or the original cut of
well, there
Suicide
was no
Squad?
there was no original
But I'm
cut of
saying like
Justice
this
League.
in their
Yeah.
mind, they go,
Yeah. Yeah.
where's this, and you're like, guys,
Expectations. That's the word you used earlier. Expectations. People have expectations, and I think it's okay to have some expectations. You can want to see something from a story, but art is subjective. And I want to watch a film. I want to see a story told from the storyteller's perspective, not from what the fans want. I can go and
right,
watch a fan film on YouTube if I want to watch what these fans want, or as I said the other day, I tweeted it the other day, Yeah, I can go and watch the end of Rogue One because the end of Rogue One is so much fan service. It's great, and I do get chills when
It's
I watch Vader
amazing,
doing all
yeah.
of that stuff and Leia flying off. It's brilliant, but it is fan service. That stuff there is what these people want from these films. They wanted Luke to come running out with a lightsaber in The Last Jedi, with green lightsaber ignited, to train Rey. But where's the story? If Rey gets to the top of that mountain, just imagine, start of The Last Jedi, Rey gets to the top of the mountain, and Luke turns around and he goes, "Oh, my daughter, you're here. Let's start training." And then
God.
Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin pop up on the rock as ghosts.
And that's what they wanted. I mean,
What's the
100% that's what they
story?
wanted.
And what's going to happen?
Yeah, what's the
Nothing.
story?
Nobody learns nothing.
That's the platonic perfection of their imagination. Like, in their idea, in the ideas they come up with, and I read it all the time in like fan fiction. Like if you read fan fiction, or the summations of fan fiction, I can't bring myself to actually read fan fiction, but in the summation of fan fiction, it's like point by point, these things that they want because they want them. Like, and the thing is, you can't make one movie. If you ever do this, you're making a huge mistake. You can't make one movie that has everything fans ever wanted. And like, I've seen now Infinity War 4 times. It's the most I've ever gone to see a Marvel movie in theater. And I love it that much because I think that they got so many elements like...
Really need to see it. I still haven't seen it.
Oh my God. I just think they got so many elements right. And so, and I actually liked it more the second, third, and fourth times as opposed to the first time.
Yeah,
so I had some issues with the first time, and then I realized like my issues. The same thing with The Last Jedi. Once I realized my issues were like, oh, I missed something. It wasn't that the filmmakers.
Yeah.
But it's like if they had thrown everything into that movie, which some people are like, oh, I would have expected, whatever. I don't want to spoil anything. So it's then where do you go from there? Then you're just repeating yourself. So what Star Wars actually has recognized, what Kathleen Kennedy's recognized and her producers have recognized, is that at some point you're going to run out of Star Wars ideas. Not ideas. There's always going to be ideas out there. But you're going to run out of Star Wars ideas because you're always going to be repeating what you did before. And kind of if you look at the Harry Potter movies, I think they're really good movies, and they're you can watch them over and over and all that. But at some point, you start to go like, oh, this is 8 movies or whatever, 7, 8 movies that feel like they could be 3. Like you don't, unless you accept the journey of them going from youth to like almost adults or adulthood at the end. It's like, this is a lot of movies to tell a very similar storyline each time. And
I do agree.
And there are a lot of times when Harry, who's now in year 4 or whatever, is like, oh, wow, look at this. And you're like, Harry, you shouldn't be that impressed by this anymore.
Yeah, you're like the greatest wizard in the wizarding
And the
world,
reason they have to do that is because they're doing it for every, like, the way Hollywood works is they're always imagining like there's a new person watching for the first time. And so you got to kind of explain them. And you have to see the world through the eyes of the audience, through the main character. Well, you can't keep doing that forever in Star Wars. Like in Star Wars, at some point, you got to change things up. So Rogue One was the first attempt. Solo is the next big attempt. Last Jedi was their attempt at saying, we're going to do something that is not like like the last trilogy. So if you look at the prequels did not end like the original trilogy. No. So if you are modeling your sequel trilogy on the original trilogy, you have to do something else, though. You can't do the same thing because the prequels didn't do that. The prequels were different from the original trilogy. They had similar beats, but that's it. So when you get to the sequel trilogy and everyone's going, oh, Rey's going to be Kenobi's daughter or Luke's daughter, and her parents are going to be somebody.
And then she's going to fight Snoke in episode 9.
Kylo and her are going to be brother or sister, or they're going to fall in love, something like this. Like, no. What Rian Johnson said was, he said, look, JJ, if that was your idea for where we were going to go with this, I'm just going to throw a grenade into the room. And I'm going to explode it. And that's why JJ and Kennedy loved it. Because they saw it and they went, oh, wow, that means we can do anything in the last movie.
And that's even what JJ has said. He even said, I was reading his quotes last night, he said, the opportunity was too big to pass up. and he states specifically that what they did with The Force Awakens had to be done. It was the beginning of these characters' stories, and he said, I realized I could do something with this, with episode 9, that we couldn't do with 7, because 7 was the beginning of their story. And and just to talk about what you were saying about like the Harry Potter and this kind of the sequel trilogy, so all of Star Wars rhymes. You know, episode 1 rhymes with 4. It all rhymes. Kid on a desert planet, etc., etc. We got Rey on a desert planet. I think people saw that and they immediately expected, oh, Rey's going to be a Skywalker, because she's and after The Force Awakens, I had disappointments as well. I did, because I was thinking, well, she's on a desert planet. She's a scavenger. She's coming from nothing. Why couldn't they have just made it Tatooine? The little things like that I had. Why? But now I understand why, and that's because she was not a Skywalker. So it didn't need to be Tatooine. Now, whether JJ intended that for what he was setting up, I don't know. The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens work brilliantly as 2 movies, as so far as it goes. My issues with The Last Jedi aren't. This is the thing. I have no issues with any of the character beats. I love what he did with Snoke, killing him off. I love what he did with Luke, because I think Luke is the most powerful Jedi of his time, but he is only human, and there's only so much a human can take, so much defeat, so much so much bad luck, and it gets to the point where he's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to fail anymore, and he retreats and he hides away and he wants nothing to do with it. And people say they didn't get not my Luke. At the end of The Last Jedi, Luke walks out in front of the whole First Order and faces down their supreme leader. So if that's not your Luke, then, what did you want? The guy's projecting himself from somewhere across the galaxy. That's like the greatest force power we've seen on screen.
And not only that, but he says early on, he is the character he claims he is. Like, he says, I'm not going to, he has learned, first of all, it's like they forget what happened in Return of the Jedi. He threw his lightsaber down. So then he spent many years in between the Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens not training Jedi. He had decided already. Then he was convinced by his nephew.
Ben Solo. Yeah, exactly.
And then he said, okay, fine, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. And then in training him, he realized, no, I think I was right the whole time. And in this time that I've been in isolation, and even prior to that, I've learned that the problem here is that the Jedi and the Sith, as they're constructed right now, or at least he doesn't say that at the time, but basically by the end of the movie, you're getting to that point. The way they're constructed right now, the way that they've been run, forces one to react to the other. And so what you need is a new Jedi Order, not run by those ideals and not run by the people who have become legends. And that is a big thing, is Luke is such a legend that he wouldn't be able to teach a new collective of Jedi, because the Sith, he believes, and the dark side would rise against him. And I think that's
balance, that people don't understand that.
And Snoke even kind of mentions that, like, what happens whenever you have a strong light side is a strong dark side meets it. And so Luke is too strong in the light side, and Snoke is too strong in the dark side. And so what you actually need to be able to eliminate this imbalance is to get rid of these two things. So Snoke is gone and Luke is gone by the end of this. So you actually have a sort of balance, because you have maybe Kylo is like we don't know really how dark side he is right now or how long he'll be that. And then you have Rey, who has dabbled in the dark side, at least does so in the Last Jedi a little bit.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so I think what we're going to get is a new Jedi Order down the line, or at least maybe by the end of Episode 9, that practices the dark side and the light, and bringing Harry Potter back into it. It will be like in Harry Potter, where you have the dark and the light arts, if you
That's
want
how
to
they
call it that,
settled it,
taught.
wasn't it? That what some would teach this dark wizardry, but it was forbidden in the schools,
Yeah.
as such, wasn't it? That's how it kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and so they will do something like that, but they will actually like learn this stuff and then learn to control themselves and learn. They will be given tools in the way that people who have mental health issues are given tools to get better.
Mm.
That is what you need. You need emotionally and mentally healthy force users learning in an order that teaches all things, not just one. Because when
Yeah.
you teach only one, you become too strong on one side, and that forces the other side to rise up against you. We see this in our current politics. We see, extreme
Yeah.
rights, extreme lefts, and what they do is they constantly clash, and at some point the middle has to take over. And we've seen this throughout history, that history
Yes,
has
of course.
always these massive left swings, massive right swings, and then there's like 100 years of peace, and that's the
Mm.
middle part. And so, I think Star Wars is setting up now that the prequels, and in fact, if you think about it, when people say there was no need for the sequel trilogy, uh, the prequels are the rise of the dark side. The original trilogy is basically the light side getting rid of the dark side, and so the sequel trilogy is the meeting of the two together. And
Hmm.
that
I can see
finally
that. I can see that.
completes the thing. Now, you could do a sequel to the sequel trilogy down the line, which
Hmm.
is like 100 years later, not with any of these characters. You could do it like 100 years later, and then what is the reaction to having
Mm.
this middle for a while? Eventually, someone will start to dabble in the dark side too much, and someone in the light side, and that will
Mm.
create like an offshoot order that fights maybe against the main order. You might have two
Mm.
factions against one. I think that would be really interesting down the line. But this is why I think they're not going to what they call the Skywalker saga is over after Episode 9. There will be
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
more Skywalker stuff, and I actually think that gives the opportunity for Kylo to die. I don't think he will,
Yeah.
but it
I,
gives the opportunity for it.
right. So I know we weren't going to actually. Me and Magnus weren't even going to talk about this. Wasn't on our podcast notes, was it? But we've digressed. But
Natural digression.
yeah, exactly. But I like it because I've been wanting to discuss this for a long time, especially on a podcast. So we might as well just take the opportunity, right?
Let's do it.
Let's do this. So here's the thing: we haven't completed the sequel trilogy yet. We still have a film left to go, right? And that can do anything. Okay. But here's how I see it. So the prequels is the rise of Darth Vader. The original trilogy is the fall of Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. The sequel trilogy is the legacy of Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker. Right now, I think we're at a point where The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi especially have addressed Anakin Skywalker. This was always intended to be the Skywalker saga, but it was Anakin's story. But each trilogy has a different main leading character. Obviously, Anakin, then we have Luke, and now we have Rey, Kylo / I would say they're very kind of. I say it's Rey's story, but the Skywalker of this story is Ben Solo now, who's obviously a dark sider. So they've addressed it, and in The Last Jedi, they do it specifically well when Snoke, a little bit of exposition, says, "I saw potential, your bloodline, a new Vader," and he says things that are for the audience to say, this is your Skywalker. This is him. This is the Skywalker. This is what Snoke wanted from him. He wanted a new Lord Vader. And I don't know what they're going to do in Episode 9. I really don't. If JJ was coming back and Ryan hadn't have done what he'd done in The Last Jedi, like I said, threw a grenade in the room, bang, it's all blown up, I would have predicted JJ would have gone, okay, we'll do some new stuff, but we will try and end it how it felt good in Return of the Jedi. But now I feel like JJ really has got a task on his shoulders to come in, and for me personally as a fan, all I want from Episode 9 is I want it not only to tie up Rey, Kylo, Finn, Poe's story. I would like it to give me some clarity in some way, even through a little bit of exposition, on Anakin's story. Now, I know Anakin's story finished in Return of the Jedi, but seeing as this is the Skywalker saga, and we've got one Skywalker left, I find it would be really interesting if in some way Anakin could be brought into the story just a little bit more, and somehow we could see how his previous life before he died affected him, and how he intends as a ghost to go forward and potentially influence anything else out there.
Yeah.
Whether they do that, I don't know.
I think I've definitely heard there have been rumors. I know, and I may be talking out of. I may not be sure about this. I feel like I am, but I think Jason Ward from Making Star Wars even talked about this. That there were at least rumors, discussions about Anakin and even Padme appearing in The Last Jedi. It may have been.
I remember the Hayden Christensen rumor, but there was never any. It was more like, I think he was doing some training or something like that, and people were word of mouth was going around. But I don't know what happened with that. But I've heard it a couple of times.
I don't know how accurate that is, but that there was at least talk of it at one point. Will it ever happen? I really don't know, because it really depends on how confident they are with Hayden as a performer.